Guys, welcome back to some more AFK Arena. Today we're back over on the YouTube account and we do have two new dimensional crossover heroes. We also have a few additional heroes within AFK Arena that have made it into the August tier list. That is right. It is already August and we have the new tier list utility out that is out. I'm really showcasing and profiling which heroes are most predominant within AFK Arena. So let's go ahead. I want to hop over, show you exactly what this tier list brings. There is a couple changes to it, so definitely want to break it down. So let's hop over and take a look at this. Now, as you'll notice, it is broken into a couple different tiers. On the left-hand side, we have our SSS tier, which is the absolute very top echelon when it comes to the heroes within AFK Arena, followed by the SS and then this S tier. These three tiers here make up a majority of all the heroes you're going to see within meta formations within AFK Arena. So let's start breaking this down from the top left. Now, the first one that we have, which is the priority, if you're doing your unlimited summons, you want to get Envy. If you do not have him built up already to 1 star, he is going to be the absolute priority for an awakened hero. Works incredibly well and is in every single game mode in AFK Arena. It is pretty pivotal to have the hero built itself. Then we have Liberta, still as a support hero, really holding his own as damage. Still best in slot in a lot of different formations. Again, utility-wise, used everywhere in AFK Arena. Same right here with Aurelia. Now, one unique thing with Aurelia is support is a buffer, plus 30, plus 40 signature item will both work incredibly well. But the thing to note with her is her collection does require erosion. That is her skills kit, and really the ability she has are dependent on erosion. So she is one that you're going to want to get that new relic and want to build a collection that has a ton, as much as you can, 3 to 5 mythic erosion abilities on there to really see her shine. Now, Demia is one, again, another support holding her own. She is built with the Mihira collection. Now, the unique thing with her is she has the ability to cheat death for the entire team. The Mihira collection gives her a cheat death in there, so it's super hard, and in a lot of game modes, she is absolutely vital to have, especially in the Abyssal Expedition, because she has the ability to cheat death within there. Then we still do have Lucilla. Now, this is the counterpart, like we've seen with Liberta. In a lot of different game modes, still seeing a lot of gameplay, has the ability to die and come back to life, and we keep seeing it time and time again. Now, these two came together. Again, still seeing a crazy amount of utility. Then we have Sha. So right here is the new hero. They are dropping her right into the SSS tier, right into the top tier with utility. Super broken when it comes to damage. That's the thing. Now, also remember, it is very, very, very early within AFK Arena for where they're planning or where they're kind of forecasting these heroes to come in, which we'll look at in just a minute. But you can see damage dealing, looking at the buff, looking at where the damage is coming in. Also the ability with the divine damage in there, getting the plus 40 signature items, getting that 67 engraving will really make a difference on the top end damage. Then when you put Sung Jin Woo in there as well, they work in perfect unison. It seems like all of the formations where we're seeing them, they're going to be run together. That way you can actually have Shahi, her damage will crit if they are run together, which is going to be broken. Also, the abilities that they have between both of them, again, kind of work in unison. It does work incredibly well. Now, the Awakened version of Athalia, again, still being used in a lot of different places. Starting to move a little bit down the tier list, but still holding her own in a lot of different places. Highborn Draconic Heroes, Lan is still the #1 priority when it comes to utility, when it comes to the hero being used. Lan doesn't need 1 star, doesn't need the engraving, will work just at Ascended, which she does work incredibly well. Then Leviathan moved into that SSS tier. There is not a game mode where Leviathan is not very present. Looking at Cursed Realm, Nightmare Corridor, even looking at the Treasure Scramble, Leviathan is very prevalent for that damage increase, the shielding aspect, the attack increase. Overall utility in a tank works incredibly well in there. Then we have Misha. Now, she is another one very similar to what we've seen with Aurelia. Does require a super specific collection that is built around defense and built around defense in its entirety. That is where you will see her shine. Lavatoon is holding out the last part in this SSS tier. Again, when you look at heroes and a few of these utility heroes with these support heroes that you can put in formations, they do work incredibly well. Then we get into this SS tier. Now, interesting enough, Randy is still in this SS tier. Now, the reason being a lot of formations, Envy is run with Randy, or Randy is built and ran as the best in slot damage dealer for a couple different places. Again, seeing a lot of utility. We have Rimuru in here, again, another crossover hero from now 2 crossovers ago, when we actually got this hero as well as Shuna. Shuna is still incredibly strong when it comes to AFK Arena. Again, utility, still seeing a lot of the support aspect. Now, Amelia's still in here, questionable about where and why she's still in here. Hasn't, and some of it might not have been updated yet. But there's 1 or 2 in here that I kind of question the utility and why they're still being, so high within the tier list. But I can also see bigger picture where if you don't have a lot of the Awakened heroes built, if you don't have a lot of other heroes, still does play a very prevalent role if you do not have everyone built. Now, the Awakened version of Estrilda falls right in the top of the SS tier. Not as a primary damage dealer, but as a way to buff up the armor and amplify the damage of those primary damage dealers. We're seeing her in a lot of different formations, still having a lot of utility. Jerome still super solid as a support buffer, especially when you start getting into the light bearers, which give them a little bit more buff, but still seeing a lot of pull. And then Valfura is seeing, again, a lot of utility as a support hero, as a Draconic hero in a bunch of different formations. The way that she works with the regeneration and everything still is incredible. Same with Ivan, the regular 4 faction. And even looking at the first kind of 2, even 3 tiers, a majority of the heroes are not from the primary 4 faction. We have seen them, and it's so very rare that we see heroes. I believe in 2025 now we're only at our second. When we did get Alvida, that was our second for primary 4 faction. I think the other one was Mira, if I remember. But overall, still seeing a ton of utility in formations. Leica is still unique to how she brings everyone in, the energy regeneration, but also the shielding and kind of that delay. Palmer, crit damage amplification, does incredibly well in the buffing aspect. The exact same with Nox. Support heroes have the ability to hold their position or their status much longer than our damage dealers because they're not as subject to the power creep that we see in AFK Arena. Thorin, I'm seeing a lot more utility over that Awakened version of Shamira, especially in the SEAL team being run, but also a couple other formations. Again, still seeing some play in there. Zora is another one that I feel like not going to see as much in the future as she continues to kind of age out and we're not seeing her as prevalent in formations. Skyland still super important if you do not have the Awakened version of Iran. If you do not have Skyland, Iran will be the substitution in there. I personally do not have Skyland, didn't have the ability to build a Highborn. Iran is my choice when we go in there as a substitution. Then we have Halia. So interesting enough, it seems like we are picking up more formations, more iterations, and Halia hasn't found herself kind of as a primary damage dealer, but we're also seeing her kind of like as a secondary damage dealer within formations. And the same can be said with Scion. Scion was best in slot with a lot of different formations. It seems like as we continue to get more heroes, as we're going through a couple iterations, I'm still seeing him in some formations, but where he used to be run a lot, he seems to be losing a little bit of ground. Now, Marcial is one, again, this is the most recent behind the solo leveling one that we've seen, which Delicious and Dungeon crossover, Marcial, and I'm actually really happy with the crossovers just for the simple fact that they are having a lot of utility and having more of the staying power. I mean, when we're seeing heroes, that are the last 3 iterations of crossover heroes, of dimensional heroes, and still having utility, that makes me super excited because it does cost a lot, just like the 2 new ones to build out. Then we have Aethys as a primary tank, guys, best in slot tank by far. Does incredibly well to hold the formation. Very hard to kill when you have them built out. Lysander is, again, a very unique one in here. We're starting to see him used, and it seems like it took an incredible amount of time, but he did kind of find his niche in AFK Arena, and he's being used in a couple different formations for the buffs that he has in there. He usually runs the king slot, but that rook slot on the 3 or 5 slot above or below him is doing incredibly well, especially the knights in the front. Rem still carrying damage as a early player. If you pick up Rem, you will never be remiss. Does incredibly well. Has some issues with survivability, but in a right team can shine really well. Naruko, the tiny tank, does incredibly with Nadia. And then we have Serenina. So this one actually dropped down. If you remember, the initial kind of came out and that SSS tier, not holding as much utility. And the big thing with her is it is super burst damage. So of course, When it comes to Nightmare Corridor, not seeing as much utility. Nightmare Corridor, we are seeing utility. Cursed Realm, we are not, because of the duration of the fight. She is very boss heavy, very burst heavy within formations, and really amping up the damage, and then slowly falls off through the formations. It almost seems like AFK Arena or Lilith made her specifically for the Nightmare Corridor itself, because that is where she is seeing the best in slot play. Then we have Laios as a buffer again, even though he's not a support. As a buffer, does incredibly well. Awakened version of Shamira, starting to see a little bit less of her, still a lot of utility within the Treasure Scramble. Iran, of course, having a lot of utility with crowd control damage, and if you don't have Skyland, that is going to be your choice. Awakened version of Sophia, still in here as a support, and Maulers still are very much lacking when you start looking at the first two. We have Naruko, and we do have Sophia. That is it for the Maulers. Yavis, utility-wise, still a lot of the mitigation. Then Trishia still does fall in the SS tier as the very last slot because of the energy regeneration that she does possess. Then we get into our S tier. This will really, again, kind of round out a majority of the formation heroes, because we have a Theo, the Chad, which is, of course, pretty strong with damage, but also the buffing aspect. So a lot of tanks have a lot of utility crossover to where they do some of the buffing. We're seeing it with mages. We're even seeing it with some like rangers like Lysander, that we're seeing a lot more of the buffing aspect than just the straight up damage aspect. Now in here, Adrian Elise, another one that does incredibly well when it comes to the ability to amplify the damage. One in here for the mitigation and overall doing a little bit of damage. Waken version of Lucius starting to continue to fall down the tier list. Now, unfortunately, I am not using him anywhere that I'm really aware of right now, short of the Treasure Scramble. So he's kind of worked his way out of the Cursed Realm, worked his way out of the Nightmare Corridor, unfortunately. But like I said before, with a lot of these heroes, is if you don't have all of them built, absolutely, if you have them built, can still fit into a lot of formations. Just because a formation changes or the meta changes doesn't make the hero and doesn't give the hero any less utility until they get fully replaced within those meta formations. Because if you don't have the new meta heroes, he is still going to be essentially the best in slot for the formations that you're running. Awakened version of Belinda, the same. Now this, of course, was the second generation Awakened hero, but with her divine damage still pretty broken. Nyla, again, kind of moving down. Draconic version of Gwen, which I love, but again, short of a niche formation every now and then, not being used. Even Tamaris, still, again, crowd control a little bit, has the enthusiasm buff. That's why players still run Tamaris within formations. Kelthin, again, falling down the tier list. Alvida, very short-lived, and even utility-wise, I feel like campaign formations work incredibly well. Tower formations, very well, but overall, again, seeing a lot less utility with the survivability that we have in the tank, still does very well. Elion is the buffer for our Draconic heroes. Rosaline will always have a place for the double ult. Same with Alna, with the ability to actually the cheat death on the other one with her ability. So the 9 of 9 furniture actually gives the other tank in the front line or the other hero in the front line immunity to death, which is very strong. Eugene, free to play, you can definitely pick him up, and I don't recommend summoning for him, even though, again, not seeing any utility that I'm aware of right now. Rain has the damage amplification. We have Lady Simona, which has the debuff, essentially, with the energy. Goran, very, again, short-lived as a mauler. We thought he'd have a lot more utility. Out of the gate, it seemed a couple places he was being used, and then very short-lived. Rowan, Mortis as a single buffed. Rowan still does have the energy potion, but Mortis, again, as a single one, earlier game can work. Scarlet in the tower, utility. And then we have Iran, and then we do have Silas as a buffer, as that immunity. And then we're just going to touch on a couple other heroes through here that we're seeing kind of everywhere. And I want to go through and show you kind of the niche formations of where we're seeing some of these heroes. Every now and then, boss formations still run the twins, very prevalent in the Abyssal Expedition. Then we get down to like a shell tier. This, again, was the Overlord crossover. Treasure Scramble, still very, very broken, but really the only place that we're seeing this hero currently being used. Then we have Kregor, is another one that is going to be used within the Treasure Scramble. Vika, still best in slot in one single boss formation, still being used in a couple different places, especially the tower. Orthos for the Orthos cheese. I hate doing the Orthos cheese, and right now in the iterations, it's in both of them. Now looking in the B tier, the Awakened version of Antandra, unfortunately being down here. And you also notice that Umbriel is here in the B tier, in the lower B tier as well. Unfortunately, this hero is many, including myself, that went in and really went gung-ho and summoned him. I'm not seeing him used anywhere at all right now within formations. So pretty sad to see. And we also do have Mira in here, which was the other primary 4 faction hero that was released in 2025. But overall, she was being used within that Thorin with the Slumbering Seal formation. And some players kind of take it or leave it. I seen her a couple times, but overall, not a lot of utility in there. Cardos is another one where you might see him sometimes in the later game of the Treasure Scramble when you're starting to make, a multitude of teams. But everybody else in here, really not any utility at all short of tower formations. Wouldn't recommend building them or really buying them up because they are going to be very expensive if you do want to build them up. And utility-wise, not really worth it. So guys, I hope it sheds some light on the tier list. I love doing this every single month. It's very cool to see all of the changes that are in here. And remember, this is utility, meaning it is heroes that are being used in different game modes, in a multitude of game modes, and definitely the best in slot to build. So guys, that's going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as always, thank you guys for watching.